Hello and welcome to another installment in a series of videos demonstrating the use of the purchase order create screen. In this video, we're going to discuss setting up defaults that affect the behavior of the screen and the orders that are created, and saving overrides in saved profiles. So let's get right into it. Loading a supplier into the screen, I can see there's an awful lot of defaults that have been loaded into the screen. Specifically, to begin with, is the order method. I can determine, or I can configure, what order method is selected by default when the screen is loaded in the purchasing setup screen. Here I can define what order method displays by default for purchases and what order method is displayed by default or selected by default for returns. The next set of options that I can control are store-specific. It controls store info screen right here on the purchasing tab. Here, the ignore overstock on consolidated orders. This affects multi-store orders and tells the application whether or not to ignore overstock or to consider it. I can also stipulate what type of order is set up by default or selected by default when I create multi-store orders. I can select either consolidated or distributed. Details on this are covered in another video. I can determine whether or not the new purchase order create screen is used in place of the PO profile screen. And lastly, I can stipulate whether or not manifest return orders can be created from the purchase order create screen and displayed on the PO main screen or not. Another set of defaults that are loaded on the screen are supplier defaults. When the supplier is first selected, the criteria tab here is loaded with defaults from the supplier order specific screen and the supplier line code screen. This grid is loaded from the details that I set up and saved in the supplier line code screen. Here, the all lines checkbox is set here, and any line codes and line code criteria that's saved in this grid is loaded by default on the PO create screen. If I make any changes to this grid on this screen, that will affect only this order. This change has not been saved in the supplier order specifics or the supplier line code screen. On the options tab, all of these details here under the default are also defaults that are loaded in from the supplier order specific screen. We look at the supplier order specific screen, my fill policy, and all of these criteria that are set up for default are loaded into the purchase order create screen. And I can override them if I like. Purchase order create screen always begins as a single order. If I want to change that, I can select additional stores to make it a multi-store order, and that's when the multi-store PO type eliminates. Now, once I've made some changes, let's say I've made changes to the supplier defaults and I want to save these changes, I can save any specific overrides, for instance, changing all these options, by saving a profile. The profile button brings up the profile, save and load profiles pop up. Here is a list of all of the profiles that I've already saved for the WBW vendor. When I have a vendor already loaded in the into the purchase order create screen, this pop-up loads automatically, selecting this particular supplier. If I want to look at other suppliers, I can look at other suppliers by selecting them from this drop-down box, or I can look at them all. Now I've come here and I have made changes in the purchase order create screen. I can elect to save these changes by clicking the Save button. By clicking this, I can save my new profile. It's not a very good name, but it's nice for this demo. Now, the screen acknowledges that my new profile has been loaded and saved. If I would like to load a different profile that I've saved in the past, it's as easy as clicking the profile button, finding the profile that I'd like, I double-clicked it, which automatically selects it for load. If any time I'm unhappy with what's happening on the screen, I can click the reset button and start again. I can either load a supplier, or go right to the profile screen. Now here, since I didn't have a vendor pre-selected in the order create screen, it automatically selects all vendors. Again, I can limit to just the ones that I'm interested in. If I want to load this one, select it, click load, and this is my profile. Again, anything I change in this screen here is only for this particular purchase order. The defaults are not saved. If I make changes to this, you'll see that the application has acknowledged that this profile has been changed. I now have a new order create scenario. If I go into the profile screen, I can overwrite by clicking this and clicking save. It'll confirm that I want to do that. Or I can save this as a new profile. Shows new multi-store profile. From the profile pop-up, I can also control profiles. When I save a profile, I'm given edit access and view access control. If I set edit access to all, I'm saying that I'm allowing anybody in my store chain to edit, change, or delete my profile. If I set it to store, only users in my particular store can edit, change, or delete it. And if I set it to creator, well then only I am allowed to affect this profile. The view access stipulates who gets to see it and use it. Setting it to all allows any store, any user in any store to make use of the profile, create orders using it, but the edit access is what controls whether they can change it. If I set it to store, only users in my store, I'm in location 7, can make use of this profile, can even see it. And if I want to be really stingy, I can set the view access to creator. Now only I can see this particular profile. I can modify profiles that I have edit access to by clicking on a profile and then clicking the properties button. Here I can change the name. I can add a comment or a description and potentially change who's allowed to manipulate or see this particular profile. There are some profiles that may be saved or stored by other users. As I click through these, you'll notice I just clicked this profile and the properties button is no longer available. That means that the user who saved this profile allowed other users to see it, but is not allowing other users to edit the profile. So as you can see, there are a lot of options, a lot of defaults that are set up on other screens that affect how this screen behaves. And whatever I change on this screen, I can save so they can be recalled in the future. It gives me a lot of flexibility and gives me a lot of control. That concludes our session on defaults and save changes. I appreciate you joining us today. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again in another video series. Have a very good day.